Hello to the three people who watch all of this. I always appreciate it. Thank you so much. Happy Friday night to everybody here. While we are here, I will just do the usual hey, if you want to support this channel, this is where you go. This is where you could support the stuff. And Den is here helping out with moderation. And if you want your questions answered, you can leave a super like. You can leave your questions there. We will make sure we get to them. This channel is really close to 100,000 subscribers. I'm hoping that happens relatively soon. So, hey, if you're not subscribed, make that happen. So many stories we're going to get to today. I figured I would start today with the thing that will keep me up at night for I think the next several months to come. And that involves something called Project 2025. And it's horrifying. I'm going to show you. This is from Politico describing what it is. But this thing is basically a conservative playbook um, that will guide the next administration. And just to give you some background here, when Trump won in 2016, that really was a surprise to pretty much everyone, including everyone who worked for Donald Trump. And what that meant is between the November election and January, when he was inaugurated about 2 months later, they didn't have everything ready to go. They didn't know who they were going to hire for key positions. They didn't know what they would do once they had power. Like, they scrambled. There's plenty of things they could whip together pretty quickly. But that's very different from saying, as soon as the election is over, and if we win, we have a set of like 1 million people we plan to hire and 1,000 executive orders we plan to have someone sign. And so this time, they're not making that mistake. They're saying, if we win, and dear God, I hope that doesn't happen, but they are saying if a Republican, probably Donald Trump, who's the presumptive nominee, but whatever, maybe Ron DeSantis or something weird like that. But if Trump wins next year or some other Republican, we have a playbook ready to go, and it explains exactly what we're going to do as soon as the next Republican president is inaugurated. And these are mostly things that could be done even if they don't necessarily control the Senate or the House or anything like that. Now, some of you may be familiar with a version of this. It's called Project Blitz. And several years ago, like the religious right groups all basically said, here's some model legislation that Congress can do, that state legislators can do. And it's basically a way to shove Jesus into the government. Some of it is anti-gay stuff. Some of it is let's make sure we can say in God we trust in schools and things like that. Project 2025 is not just about religion, but there are aspects of religion that I think are worth talking about. But just to give you an overview of Project 2025, like, let me tell you some of the big things they would do. And the reason it's called 2025, Project 2025, is whoever wins the 2024 elections in November, they would be inaugurated in January of 2025. So, for example, one of the things they plan to do, this is a Republican playbook here, is they would reinstate something called Schedule F, which basically gives Republicans the power to reclassify, then fire what they call the deep state. And here's what that means in practice. Like, when a president gets elected, they have the ability to appoint like the heads of all these departments. That's the president's right. And the Senate has to confirm a lot of those positions. But if, let's say, you talk about the Department of Education or the Department of Energy, most of the people who work in that department are not political appointees. They're like random people who chose to do this for life. Doesn't matter who the president is. They are career personnel. They are people who are just dedicating their lives to doing the work of the government, which is an amazing thing. They're the ones who keep everything running between administrations, Career employees are amazing people. What Trump or the Republicans want to do is make sure that all of those career employees get reclassified in a way that would allow the next president to fire them. That should horrify everybody. I don't want a Democratic president saying, I'm going to fire everybody who works at this department because some of them might be Republican. That would be a dumb idea because, again, those employees, their political affiliation really shouldn't make a difference. It doesn't matter. You're like an underling. Just do your job. But Republicans think there's some vast conspiracy in the government. They want to get rid of everybody. And that's why they say, like, there's a deep state. It's all rigged or whatever. And by the way, once they fire all those career employees, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to replace them with political cronies who don't necessarily know how to do those jobs. It would destroy government, which again is a long-term conservative project. They don't like government. They want to destroy government. And to get around controversial Senate nominations, Project 2025 says the president should just appoint acting heads of agencies, like temporary replacements that the Senate doesn't have to confirm, which Trump did after a bunch of his other appointees had like quit later in his administration. So that would be disturbing. But okay, so that's kind of the big takeaways that people have mentioned when they talk about 2025. But let me show you a few things that are really in this playbook. And I should tell you, this is a 920-page playbook. It's huge. It's insane. Okay, let me show you a couple things here. This is from page 4. It's early in the book, okay? Very early in the book. I will blow this up so you can see it. But look at how they talk about these things, of how they're going to recreate the government. Today, the left is threatening the tax-exempt status of churches and charities that reject woke progressivism. They will soon turn to Christian schools and clubs with the same totalitarian intent. None of that is true. None of that is accurate. Like, church-state separation groups are not calling for churches to lose their tax-exempt status on the basis of their preaching. That's not what we do. The only time that even comes up is if a pastor endorses a candidate from the pulpit, like tells the congregation how to vote. Well, now they're not following IRS rules, so it would be nice if the IRS revoked their tax-exempt status, and that would be true of any nonprofit group. But as we've seen, the IRS really hasn't acted on any of those complaints. So to pretend that that is the equivalent of threatening the tax-exempt status of churches and like faith-based charities, conservative charities, total lie. No one is doing that. And this idea that they're soon going to turn to Christian schools and clubs. No, we're not. We don't care about them. We want kids to be okay. We want private schools to play with private funds. Don't use taxpayer money. That's a far cry from any of this. Here's another thing from the exact same playbook here, if I could pull this up. Here we go. This is a section that talks about what they're going to do when it comes to religion. And one of them is providing robust protections for religious employers. Employers, not employees. America's religious diversity means that workplaces include people of many faiths and that many employers are faith-based. Nevertheless, the Biden administration has been hostile to people of faith, especially those with traditional beliefs about marriage, gender, and sexuality. What the hell are you talking about? The Biden administration opposes discrimination. They oppose bigotry. They don't have a problem with people of faith. You will not believe this. Joe Biden is, in fact, a person of faith. I know conservatives don't believe that, but it's true. Like the fact that Project 2025 conflates the two, like that Biden is not religious or something and that he's going after religion, it says more about the type of Christianity they espouse than anything negative with the current administration. The fact that they say like he's going after people with traditional beliefs about marriage and gender and sexuality, like, and they're saying that's hostile to people of faith. Guess what? There are plenty of people of faith who support marriage equality and don't have a problem with trans people. Like, they're just saying those are the two same things. Faith, people who are bigots. Like, that's, again, that they're telling on themselves right there. But again, they're not, the Biden administration is not going after people of faith. What they're saying is if there are laws in place that say you can't discriminate against gay couples, well, then the government shouldn't be rewarding your job. For example, if there is a foster care agency or an adoption agency, good for them. I'm glad they're doing that sort of work. But if it's a faith based foster care agency or adoption agency and they receive federal funding to do the work that they do, then they should not be allowed to discriminate against which couples they work with or which parents they work with on the basis of their religion. All of us know if you gave money to a Christian organization, federal money, federal taxpayer money, and the organization said, well, we don't work with Black couples or Jewish couples. Actually, let me take back Jewish one for a second. But if they said we don't work with people on the basis of race, I think everyone would rightfully say that's completely inappropriate. Of course, they can't do that. And yet, we have seen Christian owned businesses that take in federal funds say, we don't want to work with Jewish couples. We don't want to work with gay couples. And right now, they're allowed to do that. But criticizing that is not the same as criticizing faith. That should be obvious to everyone. Here's another thing they plan to do. They want to go after education as well. And let me show you what they're trying to do on this front. Here is another thing. Let me explain what this one is talking about for a second. They want to basically attack the education system because right now, the Project 2025 is calling for mandatory religious exemptions from accreditation standards and criteria for public schools. So basically, what that means is any religious private school or university that fails to meet accreditation standards, meaning they're not really teaching kids what they need to be teaching kids for them to say, we gave this kid a degree in history. Well, in order to make that count, that kid needs to be learning history. And that's what accreditation means. And religious schools are saying we want an exemption from those standards. So look at what this says. We want to protect faith-based institutions by prohibiting accreditation agencies from requiring standards and criteria that undermine the religious beliefs of or require policies or conduct that conflict with the religious mission or religious beliefs of the institution and intruding on the governance of colleges and universities controlled by religious organization. Here's what that means in practice. If you're a private Christian university and you're, let's say, giving a degree in psychology or something like that, well, guess what? There are aspects of psychology that deal with gender and sexuality. And if you're not teaching that, or you're teaching it incorrectly by lying about gay people or trans people, then an accreditation agency can say, well, you can't legitimately say you're giving a history degree or a psychology degree or anything like that. There are some standards. And what this is saying is we need to make sure religious institutions can just get away from all that. The government has no right to tell us our degrees are worthless or something like that. Just a horrible idea. The document also says that no public institution, public schools, public colleges, they cannot require teachers or professors to use a trans person's pronouns if it goes against the teacher's religious beliefs, which is basically a way to say, I get to be a bigot if I'm religious and you can't stop me. Sex discrimination protections get attacked as well. So here's an example of that. There's something called Title IX. It's a federal law that basically prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex. Now, the Obama administration actually allowed colleges to say, listen, we are Christian colleges and we do discriminate on the basis of sex because, women belong in the kitchen or whatever it is that they believe. The Obama administration said, okay, you're allowed to get an exemption to the rule, but all the schools that get the exemption, we are going to put you on a list so people know that you are exempt from the rules. That's just basic transparency. Like, okay, fine. If you don't want to follow the rules, we're at least going to let people know you're not following the rules. Well, guess what Project 2025 says? When it comes to that stuff, check this out. They say we want to eliminate the list of shame. In 2016, the Obama administration published on the Department of Education's website a list of colleges that had applied for the exemption. This list of shame of faith based colleges, as it came to be known, it was not known as that, has since been archived on the Education Department's website, still publicly available. The president should issue an executive order removing the archived list and preventing such a list from being published in the future. So what does that mean? That means Christian colleges want to make sure they can discriminate and that the public doesn't know about it. Because if they did, it would make those schools look really friggin' bad. Like, that's what these people are trying to do. They want to break the rules. They want to make life worse for students, and they don't want anyone knowing that they're doing that. Here's another thing that they want to do here. Because again, I need to stress, a lot of government funds go to faith-based organizations that often do secular things. And there's not anything wrong with that as long as they're playing by the rules and doing secular work. But check this one out. We want to protect faith-based grant recipients from religious liberty violations and maintain a biblically based, social science reinforced definition of marriage and family, which is a very long way of saying, hey, we might be bigots, but we still want your money, right? That's all that's saying. It basically means if these groups oppose marriage equality or trans identities, all these groups still want access to that money. And I think the funniest thing about this that made me laugh out loud, check out this thing at the very end here. Despite recent congressional bills like the Respect for Marriage Act that redefine marriage to be the union between any two individuals, these particular religious program grants should be available to faith-based recipients who affirm that marriage, wait for it, is between not just any two adults, but one man and one unrelated woman. And that makes me laugh because you just know they used to say marriage is between one man and one woman. And then someone at one of these Christian groups piped up and said, hey, we have a little problem here between the one man and one woman thing, and it's called the South. And we need to include one extra word right in the middle there. Let's say unrelated. Just stick that thing in there. And now we're on the right track. Just ridiculous. What else is in this horrible thing? Oh, this is one I was not expecting. I have not heard Christian groups making this argument, but here it is. Congress should encourage communal rest by amending the Fair Labor Standards Act to require that workers be paid time and a half for hours worked on the Sabbath. First of all, if you want to encourage communal rest, I'm all for a 4-day work week. That sounds like a wonderful idea. That's not what they're talking about. And they also want workers to be paid like time and a half, overtime pay, which also great idea, for working on the Sabbath, which is weird because there are some companies that want to be open on the Sabbath. And what they're saying here, that day would default to Sunday, except unless you have a different Sabbath. But, we're going to use the Christian version of it as default. And houses of worship and employers legally required to work around the clock would be exempt, as would workers otherwise exempt from overtime. Yeah. Here's what they're trying to do. This is not the workers' right platform that you might think at first sight. This is. What they're trying to do is force companies to just shut down on Sundays so that people can go to church. Because these companies, according to this argument, if they kept the job open on Sundays and people had to work on Sundays, and then these companies had to pay those employees time and a half, well, that's a lot of extra money. What are the employers going to do if that became a law of some sort? Well, they might just all have to close on Sunday. And hey, guess what? That means it's more time for employees to go to church. So This is not about employees' rights. This is about using the government to pressure companies to shut down so people can go to church. How messed up is that? Like, they've really thought through this. There's one more thing I wanted to show you all from this particular thing. Oh, I should say there are multiple references to this country's supposed Judeo-Christian tradition, quote, stretching back to Genesis. That's in the text. And it talks about God-given rights, but there are no mentions of non-Christian religious beliefs. The Freedom from Religion Foundation Action Fund actually said the only mentions of Islam in all 920 pages of this document, they are references to terrorism and concerns about the Islamic Republic of Iran's nuclear capabilities. And the document also says religious devotion and spirituality are the greatest sources of happiness around the world. Just like that, it's a fact. No citations given whatsoever. Other things in this document. There are policy changes that would open the door to religious organizations getting loans from the Small Business Administration. It would endorse religious pharmacists who don't want to give birth control to patients. It supports religious bigots with taxpayer dollars, which I mentioned. It gives faith-based anti-vaxxers a way to spread diseases in the name of Jesus. That's in here as well. Here's the last thing I'll mention here. There's a section of the document written by Roger Severino, who is a very famous anti-LGBTQ activist, where he talks about why the CDC precautions during COVID to prevent, mass gatherings, everything had to get shut down during COVID because no one really knew what was going on. We didn't want the virus to spread. So they said, look, large gatherings are no good. Don't do it. And then a lot of churches complained because they were selfish. And they said, well, our church will still meet and we'll meet in person and masks are optional. And they did all this stuff that just spread the virus even more. Well, Roger Severino has a section in here where he talks about what the government should do once the Republicans take over the CDC. And check this out, because this is frightening. Let me make sure. There we go. Check this out. The CDC can and should make assessments as to the health costs and benefits of health interventions, but it has limited to no capacity to measure the social costs or benefits they may entail. For example, check this out. This is messed up. How much risk mitigation is worth the price of shutting down churches on the holiest day of the Christian calendar and far beyond, as happened in 2020? What is the proper balance of lives saved versus souls saved? The CDC has no business making such inherently political and often constitutional assessments and should be required by law to stay in its lane. What he's referring to is Easter occurred early during the pandemic in 2020, and churches couldn't meet in person. And that's like their biggest fundraising day of the year. And what Severino is basically saying here is, who cares if lives are saved? We're trying to save something we just made up in our heads, and that should count even more than the death of all the old people in your lives. And the CDC, whose job is to care about physical health and like all that sort of stuff, well, they have if my religious beliefs they are more important than whatever the CDC says. Just think of how insane that logic is. Whatever your religious beliefs are, they supersede what experts in epidemiology, all the doctors who spend their lives thinking about this stuff, researching this stuff. Severino says, doesn't matter because, I don't know, religious people wanted to meet in person, so you don't get to tell us no. The next time there's a pandemic, these churches are still going to meet and they will spread the virus because they are so selfish. They do not care about what happens as a result of their gathering. That's the problem. It's utter selfishness. We knew that when COVID occurred and they were trying to push for this stuff. And now they want to codify it into law, which is horrible. By the way, COVID has taken the lives of an estimated 6.7 million people across the globe so far. And this guy is saying that he thought the CDC's policy of, hey, try not to kill people, that was anti-Christian rather than pro-health. And so any science-based recommendations just tossed out the window if this project goes into effect. Like, bottom line is Project 2025, it's this Christian nationalist wish list that elevates white evangelical bigotry at the expense of everyone else. It's it's written and it's published right now to convince the Republican base that they need to fall in line and vote for whoever the GOP nominee is, even if it's Donald Trump, even if some Republicans are feeling squishy about him, and even if he's ultimately convicted of his crimes. This document is saying none of that matters. This is what we're going to do no matter who the Republican figurehead is in office. So vote for Republicans is what they're trying to get at. By the way, they have a $22 million budget to work with. They have an advisory board full of right-wing organizations with this long history of hurting marginalized groups, spreading lies about American history, filing lawsuits to attack civil rights protections. They're trying to ban books. This is the future that awaits us if Republicans win the next election. And it doesn't matter who the president would be. This is what Republicans plan to do. This is not fear-mongering. They are literally telling us all their plans in writing more than a year in advance. Think about that. It's a scary document. All right, I'm going to take a break for a second. What questions do we have before I move on to the next story? April, thank you for that donation. Thanks for keeping us informed. I appreciate it. I'm glad this helps. Anything else here? Very much what Andrew Seidel lays out in his book. Yeah, he talks about, oh my God, the name of the book is escaping me. Oh my God, Andrew, I'm so sorry. What's the name of the book here? I'm getting the Uh, I'm going to look this up really quick. I want to make, yeah, there we go. The Founding Myth, Why Christian Nationalism is Un-American. It's a great book. He lays out exactly what the long-term plan is, but his book was written before Project 2025 came out. It affirms everything he was saying in his book. Other questions here before I move on. Tens of thousands of civil servants who serve in roles deemed to have some influence over policy would be reassigned to Schedule F employees. Yeah, Pragmatic Crystal has it right. And once they get that designation, they can be fired by whoever is in charge. It's a horrible idea. And I mean, I've seen some coverage of it, but I don't think people understand just how devastated our government would be if we lost all those employees that we need. They keep everything running. Project 2025 is the blueprint for the transition to a Republic of Gilead style Christian nationalist hellscape. That should really be the slogan underneath the document. I agree. And it's scary. And again, there's so much. Have you seen these polls that show, like, I know it's not a popular vote for the election, but the majority of Americans prefer Trump over Biden because none of this stuff that is happening in the world is getting through to a lot of people. And so, I mean, this is what we have to look forward to if people who know better sit out during the next election because they don't love Biden, or if people are dumb enough to throw away their vote on some third party candidate out of principle. Like, this is what they're supporting. This is what they are rooting for. It's this Christian nationalist hellscape. Traditional beliefs equals Christian. Yeah, it's code. It's not just Christian. Traditional is their euphemism for whatever bigotry they are trying to espouse. If you don't want to be on the list of shame, stop being shameful. Right on. If you don't want people calling your school bigoted, stop it. We're going to talk about one of those schools in just a second. Let me riff for a second. I don't know if you had a chance to watch this yet, but there was an HBO documentary that just came out maybe a week or two ago at this point called Savior Complex. And you should write that down, Savior Complex. I don't have that right in front of me, but I will show you. No, I'll get back to it in a second. But basically, I'm going to tell you the story behind this. It's a 3-part docuseries. Each episode is about an hour long. But let me tell you the backstory for Savior Complex, because it's messed up. And I remember hearing about it years ago, and I had kind of put it out of my mind until this series was released. But basically, the story here is there was a 19-year-old woman. Her name was Renee Bach. She was a homeschooled Christian, lived in Virginia. And like so many other homeschooled people that live in these conservative homes, go to conservative churches, she decided she wanted to be a missionary. And where does she want to spread the gospel? Uganda is what she landed on. So she went to Uganda and she decided she wanted to help malnourished children. Which, you know what? That's great. Good for her. That's a good cause. Better than building a church or just praying over people. So she wanted to help these children. She formed a nonprofit called Serving His Children, which used money raised from her church to supposedly help these kids. It covered a lot of medicine, a lot of the food that kids who are malnourished would need. Again, that's wonderful. She even had a nurse on staff, several volunteers. But here's where it went horribly wrong. Renee has no medical training whatsoever, but that didn't stop her from doing medical shit on these children who needed medical help. She seriously thought God would just guide her hands and tell her what to do. And basically, she treated these kids who were dying like they were lab rats. And even if a nurse was nearby or other trained professionals were surrounding her, she would still perform roles meant for a qualified nurse, not a random Christian who is just running on good intentions. And the kicker, I'm going to show you this headline because this is kind of how you may have heard of this story. 105 kids died. Here you go. 105 children died in her organization. She was supposed to care for them, and then over 100 of those kids died. That's Renee for you right there. So this is what Savior Complex kind of gets into, because as much as you want to just get angry about this and blame Renee for what she did, there actually is some nuance to this story. But before I get there, there are two mothers in 2019 whose kids died under her watch. They sued her for misrepresenting herself as a doctor and saying that she had this clinic, which it wasn't a clinic. A New Yorker article from a couple years ago actually said, I'm going to read you a portion of what it said. A gardener who worked there for 3 years, this is at saving, what was it called again? Yeah, serving his children. A gardener who worked there for 3 years asserts that Bach posed as a doctor. She dressed in a clinical coat, often had a stethoscope around her neck, and on a daily basis, I would see her medicating children. An American nurse who volunteered at Saving His Children states that Bach, quote, felt God would tell her what to do for a child. A Ugandan driver says that for 8 years, quote, on average, I would drive at least 7 to 10 dead bodies of children back to their villages each week. So that's horrifying. Renee Bach would put IVs into these kids. She would prescribe medication. She performed at least one blood transfusion. And look, there are some aspects of medical care that anyone can just learn how to do with a bit of training. That could happen. But to have a layperson do all of that is very unethical. And also, the reason you don't want a random person doing a lot of this stuff is because there are potential problems. What if something goes wrong? Well, a trained professional, a trained medical professional knows how to deal with the troubleshooting. A random person hasn't done that. They don't know what to do in those situations, and their intervention could make the problem worse. So the lawyers, one of the lawyers for the mothers who were suing Renee Bach actually said, imagine if a 20-something Ugandan woman had gone to the United States and set up an equivalent arrangement to treat impoverished American children. She would have been prosecuted. She would have been behind bars. And that's absolutely true. There's no way that would be allowed in the United States. So this documentary, this whole story of Renee, it goes into white saviors. You know, these white people who just go to these countries full of African people and think they are going to save them and no one else can. It talks about volunteerism. that you want to see the world. So you're going to volunteer in these countries, but are you really helping? Not really. It questions how Uganda could allow someone like her to care for children without a medical license. Like, what the hell were they doing? So I told you there was some nuance to this, and this is what they actually get into in the documentary, which I do appreciate. Here's one example of what I'm talking about when it comes to nuance. Because how on earth could there be what's the upside? What's the silver lining to what Renee was doing? Well, for example, there was a nearby children's hospital, but they didn't have the money that Renee did, so they didn't necessarily have the medical equipment and the medicine and all that stuff that Renee had access to. So, like, they couldn't provide the care that Renee might have been able to provide. Another thing, Renee, according to their documentation, 105 children died. That is a mortality rate of 11% of all the kids who were in their care. Well, guess what? Over that same time period, that nearby children's hospital had a mortality rate of 14%. So does that mean Renee actually did better than the hospital? That is what Renee says. However, you have to think that if a kid is in the hospital, they're probably more likely to be on the verge of death. The hospital's getting kids who are more sick, so their mortality rates are going to be higher. At the same time, keep in mind that because Renee had money but no skills and wasn't surrounding herself the right way, even if she had an 11% mortality rate, is there a chance that rate could have been lower if she actually hired doctors to do the job? Arguably so. And then how come that doesn't matter? Like, if she had listened more than tried to do this shit herself, wouldn't those lives have been saved? Some lives, maybe. Then again, with the nuance, like, if she wasn't there at all, what would have happened to some of these kids who couldn't go to a hospital or something? So none of that is to say she should be let off the hook, but that, it's not her fault alone. There are plenty of people who egged her on, who helped her do this. People had the opportunity to stop her along the way. They didn't. Christians donated to her cause because she was documenting it on her blog for several years. They didn't say anything was wrong with this. They gave her money to keep doing it. And by the way, she was posting when some of these kids died too. That didn't stop these people. And also, Uganda deserves some blame for not having a good system of checks and balances to keep people like her out. Here's another thing I liked about the docu-series, Savior Complex. They actually focused on a group called No White Saviors, which included a white woman who was kind of like Renee. She went to Uganda to do some missionary work and then realized, oh, they don't actually want me here, and I don't think this is a good idea. So she started with other people. She started a group called No White Saviors. And when they heard about Renee's story, they started posting really straightforward, blunt, sometimes exaggerated and harmful things about Renee was doing. Like, she's murdering people. She's the devil incarnate. It's a very one-sided view of what was happening. They were just blasting this stuff out on social media, whipping up a frenzy against Renee, and also, earning their No White Saviors group some money in the process. Well, her credit, the producer of the series, she spoke with Renee. She spoke with Renee's mother. She spoke with this white woman behind No White Saviors, who doesn't exactly come off looking great. She looks like someone with an axe to grind the entire time. And also, all these people are just doing this all on social media, trying to one-up each other. Like, one person saying, we saved kids, give us more money. The other saying, she's killing kids, give us more money to stop her. And I don't know, I don't feel good about any of these particular groups, because the No White Saviors group also took things very far. They took things out of context at times. They made it look a lot worse than the actual full story makes it seem. The only person in the series I really liked, and who I think came off looking pretty well, was a nurse named Jackie Kramlich, who is really a Christian missionary who went to Uganda. She heard about what Renee was doing. She said, all right, God is calling me to go to Uganda and work with Renee. And she had talent, like, she is a nurse. But when she went there, she realized pretty quickly, oh no, what are you doing here? And within a few months, she got the hell out. And she wrote a letter to the board of directors of Renee's group saying, you got to stop all of this right now because this is messed up. Unfortunately, the board of Renee's organization consisted of like her mom and other church people, and like none of them took that letter seriously. Um, it's a really, I haven't given anything away. That's the thing. We all knew that story years ago. I will show you. This is the article from the New Yorker that really covered this stuff in depth a couple of years ago. A Missionary on Trial. It's really long. It's written by Ariel Levy, who's a wonderful writer for that magazine. And it really covers this stuff in a lot of depth. If you get a chance, look that up, read it. It's wonderful. I'll send it to you if you can't get access to it. One thing I really appreciated about Savior Complex is one, you get to actually see their faces talk about this stuff. It gives people a chance to really understand this story. But really, what I like is that stories like this take issues that matter to people like us and they bring it to mainstream audiences. Like, I like that this story, which was really only covered in like church state separation areas or like niche magazines or like NPR, now it's on HBO. A lot more people are going to learn about these issues. They're going to get their opinion about missionary work and when it can be messed up. They get the idea of no white saviors, which is a good concept for them to learn. It's the same thing as like the Duggar one that came out a few months ago, Shiny Happy People, on Amazon Prime Video. Because again, I'm sure people know about the Duggars. I don't think they know a lot about the religious fundamentalism that they grew up in, but Shiny Happy People really talked a lot about that messed up religious belief, all those beliefs that underlied all the horrible stuff that happened with the Duggars. So I love that these docuseries are finally reaching other audiences, bringing our issues to the public. Like, there is an audience eager to hear fair criticism of faith-based beliefs. And that's very different from people, I mean, myself included, who just kind of trash religion all the time. I'm not pretending I get through to everybody, but these sorts of docuseries, which I think are about as fair as they ought to be, they do give people this insight into these organizations, these people that don't show religion in a good light, because in these cases, you shouldn't show religion in a good light. It is really hard to watch a series like this one, Savior Complex, and come away with more sympathy for the religious people who do a bunch of horrible things in the name of God. Like, we see them harming people. We hear about them harming people. I don't know what you do with that information if you don't follow this stuff, other than to think, wow, I don't think I'll give money to my church for mission trips in the future. I don't think I want to belong to my church in the future. So that is, I hope, one of the upsides that comes from this series. What questions do we have about all this? Yeah, that story got unfun real fast. Sorry, 105 kids died under Renee's watch. It's not fun, but also people need to know that is what happens. And again, some of those kids might have died anyway because of the situation they were in. She didn't necessarily cause that. By the way, they do show an ending to what happened with that lawsuit that two mothers filed against Renee. They do show an ending to what happened to that No White Saviors group. Very interesting stuff. But people need to hear it. How about give the funds to the hospital? So yeah, why didn't Renee, who's taken in all this money, give that money to the hospital that was nearby? The docuseries actually interviewed a doctor who works at that hospital who basically asked that very question. And yeah, he was annoyed too. He's like, we have the people here who can help these kids as best we can, but we lack the resources. And it's kind of, I mean, you got to imagine how infuriating it must be that you're struggling to do what you can with very limited resources. And then this random white woman, Christian, walks in and just has this pile of money that she is using to do who knows what to all these kids. It's disturbing. Thank you for that donation narrative, dude. Thank you for spreading the facts on this nightmare of a document, Project 2025. I'm new to your live stream, but a fan of your videos. I'm glad I found this resource and I'll use it. 2025 would be a true nightmare. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I'm glad you find it helpful. And by the way, I will leave when I post this clip for 2025. I will leave the show notes underneath in the description. But anyway, you can Google Project 2025. You will find the documentation, all 920 pages of it. Actually, right now, while I have it up here, I'm going to leave a link in the YouTube comments for anyone watching this live. There is the document in case you want to read this while we are talking on YouTube. What else we got here? Lick that like button, folks. That's right. That's how YouTube works. Come on, lick this all the way to 100,000 subscribers. We'll make it happen, America. I'm going to jump if there's nothing else there. Let me go as I pull this up for. Oh, we got to talk about this. Give me 1 second here to just pull this up. Look at this headline. I'm going to show you right now. And then let's talk about this story. I stared at this for a little bit. Liberty University broke safety laws for years, government asserts. And I did not know I was going to get another Liberty University story so soon. But this, again, it's a messed up story. And I want to tell you basically what happened. So apparently, for years now, Liberty University has not kept its campus safe. And there is a law that says you got to do a certain number of things when it comes to safety on campus. And allegedly, Liberty University has violated that law. Here's how that works. There is a law called the Clery Act, Clery, the Clery Act. And it says if you get any federal financial aid, student loan money, grants from the education department, then you have to tell the government crime statistics about your school, things that you are doing to keep kids safe, basic things like that. Doesn't matter if you're a religious institution, public institution, whatever. So that's what the Clery Act says you have to do. Well, according to an investigation that the education department just had, and they just released preliminary information here, I'm quoting from the Washington Post here. Liberty failed to warn the campus community about gas leaks, bomb threats, and people credibly accused of repeated acts of sexual violence, including a senior administrator and an athlete. That's what the report says. And in fact, one of the safety consultants the Post spoke with said, this is the single most blistering Clery report I have ever read, ever. So some of the things that they mention here, like the document has not been made public yet, this preliminary investigation. But it says the school didn't take complaints of crimes seriously. They didn't produce incident reports when crimes occurred. They didn't warn the campus about emergencies and any safety threats. They didn't tell crime victims of their rights. They didn't deal with the data for crime statistics properly. Here's the most damning thing, I think, in the report. I'm quoting again from the Post. The report, let me show you this. I want to make sure I am reading this correctly, so that's why I am doing this. Yeah, let's do right here. Check this out. The report cites a numbered Liberty University Police Department incident report that the school did not enter into the daily crime log. They just didn't put it in their permanent list of crimes. An alleged rape that was committed by a former Liberty president. A president of the school was an alleged sexual assaulter. And then, as you could see below here, only 2 former Liberty presidents were alive at the time, which means it's either Jerry Falwell Jr. who was accused here, or it's some other dude no one's heard of. And the next paragraph here, it was absolutely not an allegation about me, Jerry Falwell Jr. said. I've never heard anything about it. It had nothing to do with me. The other guy did not comment at all, which, I don't know. That's messed up, but that is also in this report. Here's one thing that the Clary report touches on, the incident report touches on, but also I've heard this at a lot of fundamentalist Christian schools. One of the reasons you really want these crime statistics documented, posted, is because, look, if there is an assailant on campus, you want students on campus to know that, you shouldn't be walking outside alone right now. People are being attacked. It's scary, whatever the case may be. But at a place like Liberty University, one of the fears is that a lot of people do not report when they are sexually assaulted, if that happens, because think about what that means. Let's say you're a woman on campus and you say, I went on a date with another student on campus. He came back to my dorm room, which he's not supposed to do at Liberty because boys and girls can't be in the same dorm room. And let's say the woman invited her boy, he sexually assaulted her. And let's say they started fooling around and then he sexually assaulted her or something like that. What is she going to do at this point? If she goes to the school and says, this person attacked me, you know what the conservative Christian response to that would be. It's not that, well, that man should not have done that, and we're going to make sure that never happens again, and we're going to punish the boy. That's not going to happen. They're going to be like, well, what were you wearing? Well, why did you let this guy into your dorm room? Why did you start fooling around with him anyway? You're supposed to save everything until marriage. Like, if you report sexual assault, you're basically telling on yourself. That's not me saying that. That is stuff so many women who go to these conservative Christian schools have said. And it's a reason they are very afraid to report sexual assaults when they are the victims. That's horrifying. And according to this Clary report, people who reported sexual violence or other incidents were frequently questioned about their own conduct that may have allegedly contributed to the incidents, which that is not any way to keep students safe. But these people are so hung up on purity culture that they're overlooking the bigger sexual violence that is occurring. Another thing that happened, mentioned in this Clary report, is that in 2016, they did issue an emergency notification about a bomb threat, but the campus police officer who actually issued the warning was subjected to disciplinary action for issuing the notice, even though he did exactly what he was supposed to do. Basically, Liberty University got mad at the police officer for reporting a bomb threat, I assume because that sort of thing makes the school look bad, especially if that gets leaked to the public. So they got mad at the cop for reporting that. Like, how messed up is your school when image, and I know this is not Liberty specific, but when your image and reputation takes precedence over the safety of kids on campus? That's a messed up place. And I know it's not just Christian universities that do that. Other ones do it too. But still, I should point out Liberty University has issued a statement in response to all of this. But really, you can, even if you read through this entire statement, it doesn't say anything really meaningful. It just says, yeah, they issued a report, but we're going to respond to the report and we're going to explain what they got wrong because we keep safety at the top of our minds. Like, it's that sort of boilerplate content. But right now, Liberty hasn't responded to the actual allegations made. They haven't said what they're going to, they definitely haven't said, we're going to make sure anyone who reports sexual violence is immune from punishment. And we're not going to we're not going to slut shame somebody because we don't like what they did. There's nothing about the alleged administrator who assaulted anyone. I don't know what they're going to do about that. But that's what the report says. And now it's in Liberty's hands. They got to respond to the report, and then the report will eventually be finalized. We're not there yet, but I don't know. I wouldn't feel safe on Liberty University's campus. And that's a weird thing to say about a very private Christian school that I went to school in the middle of downtown Chicago and like went out late at night by myself a lot of times. I know that wasn't necessarily safe, but also I felt like I was pretty much going to be okay. But to go to a college campus that is basically in the middle of a smaller community, you would think Lynchburg, Virginia, Liberty University is a relatively safe place, but apparently they're not even doing a good job of keeping up that charade. So I don't know, messed up stuff. What other questions do we have here? Seventh circle of hell, so delicious. But how can I give a one-time gift? James, thank you for that question. If there is a one-time gift, you know what? If you go to any of my videos on YouTube right now and you look in the description, there actually is a link for a PayPal donation or anything like that. I apologize for not having it on me right now, but thank you for asking, and I appreciate it. Would you have heard about an allegation that wasn't documented? I'm not sure what you're getting at there. I mean, the question is, what is the school going to do when someone reports any of this stuff to them? They have a legal obligation to take some notes to make sure they are documenting this stuff in case it happens again, to make sure they have it in writing. And other students should be able to, if other students have similar stories, then the school has an even bigger obligation to make sure this doesn't happen again. So, um, sexual abuse at Liberty U and harassment is epic. Yeah, another data point in the trend line. Again, I mean, the fact that all the stories that came out about Jerry Falwell Jr. and his wife, um, when it came to his wife, there actually was like some pretty disturbing stuff there and some salacious stuff about Jerry Falwell Jr. And the hypocrisy was off the charts. But this is the amazing thing about Liberty University. They have these rules designed to keep everyone like, they treat you like a child even when you're like 20 years old. And yet, as this Clary report investigation, Clary Act report suggests, students are not safer because of that stuff. They're actually in a worse off position because they they can't report some of this stuff or they'll get in trouble. And so, telling people you actually did something you weren't supposed to do and that led to something worse, like, you're better off not reporting it at all. I mean, we have talked about this in the past too, but there are stories where women at some of these Christian high schools or colleges get pregnant, and what are they supposed to do at that point? They could get an abortion, depending on the state they live in. They could get an abortion, which they're not supposed to do under the rules of their religion. Or they could say, I want to keep the child. However, that means admitting they had premarital sex. And sometimes they don't want to do that either. So which one should they choose? Like, a lot of these Christian schools don't really give people an out other than because either they're going to implicate themselves or they're going to do something they really don't want to do. And they're leaving them with no option there. So that's disturbing. Any other questions there before I get to the next story here? All right, let me go to this story about a North Dakota GOP lawmaker. His name is Brandon Pritchard. I had not heard of this guy before this week, and now I've heard way too much about this guy. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you his picture because that's him. How old do you think Brandon is? And I'm not going to answer that just yet, but he's a new lawmaker in North Dakota. He's a state representative. We'll get back to his age in a second, but I'm going to show you what he tweeted this week because it was messed up. This is my first introduction to this fellow. All schools should have LGBTQ history taught. Interesting. And lesson 1 should be Sodom and Gomorrah. So we know what he's getting at there. He's referencing Genesis 19 when God uses fire and brimstone to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah on account of their wickedness. And again, conservatives usually argue that the wickedness in question involves sodomy, but it could be argued that the sin was that they were not hospitable to strangers. But either way, what he's getting at is that all kids need to be told that if you're gay, God's going to come after you. That's what he's getting at. So that's Brandon for you. Wait, it gets worse. So then I started looking at this guy's past. And this is what he posted when he got elected, like shortly after he got elected. If you have pronouns in your bio, you're probably a loser. Like, just unnecessary Just transphobic, stupid stuff right there. That's who we're talking about. You will never guess what party he belongs to. Never. It's an open question. Yeah, he's a Republican. Here's another thing he tweeted, because now he's on a roll, this guy, and he's just running with it. Here we go. Here's a simple test to determine if you are conservative. Should the Church of Satan or Satanic Temple be allowed the freedom to worship in the same way as Christians? If you answer yes, you need to rethink your claimed political identity because you are not conservative. So, should the Church of Satan or Satanic Temple get to worship like Christians? My understanding is that if you have religious freedom, the answer is yeah. Doesn't matter what you believe, you're allowed to worship. As long as you're not hurting anybody, you're definitely allowed to worship however you want. That is what freedom of religion is all about. That is literally enshrined in the Constitution. But Brandon over here, the constitutional expert, says no. If it's not a religion, if it's a religion I don't like, you shouldn't get to do it. And if you think they should be allowed to do it, you're not a true conservative. And only he gets to define what that is. Let's keep going with this guy. What else has he tweeted this week? There we go. Every conservative state should put into code that Jesus Christ is king and dedicate their state to him. Force rhinos to say no to Jesus and then brutalize them in elections. We need a government of Christians, not fakers. First of all, it's hilarious to me that he lives in a democracy, but he wants a monarchy and a theocracy. I don't know if it's one or the other of those go hand in hand, but there you go. And once again, you would think a guy who loves the Constitution has gotten past at least the First Amendment and the Establishment Clause. And here he is saying, no, we're 100% establishing a religion state by state, of course, not federally. And he says there are people who might say no to this, but Rhino, Republican in name only, that's basically, you're not really a Republican. He's basically defining it as I'm the only true conservative Republican Christian, and anyone who disagrees with me isn't just someone I disagree with. They're someone who's not a true Republican, a true conservative, a true Christian. Like, that is this dude over and over. And then he topped it all off with this one more tweet I will show you here. The U.S. Senate and House should have a fitness test every year. Very simple. Every member of Congress must do 5 sit-ups, 5 push-ups, 1 pull-up, and submit to the gospel of Jesus Christ. How many would make it? Okay, first of all, do you know how many Republican lawmakers will not be able to do a sit-up? I'm not saying I could do like 5 push-ups either, but I know a bunch of Republicans can't do a sit-up. And again, and submit to the gospel of Jesus. Like, I know this is cliche, but the word religion appears twice in the Constitution. Both times it is preceded by the word no. No religion, no religious test for public office, no establishment of religion by the government. So this idea that, oh, no, there is a religious test and it's my religion, that's like what babies would say when they heard about this stuff. And also, think about this. There are so many moderate Christians, not crazy fundamentalist Christians, but there are plenty of other Christians who would never want to use their government position to submit to the gospel of Jesus Christ. Like, good for them. They respect church-state separation. And this guy says, nope, they need to be kicked out too. Only Christians allowed in the government, which in another way is like, he's really saying no Jews allowed, no atheists allowed, no Hindus, no Muslims. That's what he's getting at. He just flips it. He frames it in a slightly different way. I was looking up this guy because then I just got bored and I wanted to see what else he's tweeted. I was reading an article about him, and it said that his only real accomplishment since entering office, like in November of 2022 or getting elected in November 2022, was culture war stuff. This is from a local paper. His most visible accomplishment during the regular legislative session earlier this year was a largely toothless ban on drag shows that he promoted as a culture war victory, but in reality has little real world impact outside the undertones of malice it communicated to North Dakota's LGBTQ community. This is a tweet he posted that got him on the anti-LGBTQ stuff. This is in North Dakota. Check this out. Apparently at North Dakota State University, they elected 2 homecoming kings. And Brandon over here was so mad about that. I am extremely disappointed with North Dakota State University over their decision to have 2 homecoming kings and no homecoming queen. People will be mad when I introduce a bill next session to say that state-funded schools cannot pick homecoming royalty of the same sex. But I didn't start the fight. Like, truly a guy with this pulse on what matters to voters everywhere. And by the way, the school did not pick 2 homecoming kings. I promise you it was the students who are totally fine with it because those guys look awesome. Besides that, let me fill in some blanks for you here. Brandon Pritchard, our friend here, he's 22. He's from North Dakota again. And here's the thing. How did this guy get into office? Besides the fact that it's North Dakota, and I think only 3 people vote in every election because that's the full citizenry. In the GOP primary, the top 2 people get to move on to the general election. Well, guess what? Brandon finished second by literally 253 votes. Very small margin. It wasn't a huge election, but that's still a small margin. So he skated above the fold. He took second place. Him and the first place finisher got to go to the general election. Now you would think, okay, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. Nope. Democrats didn't even run. It was just the 2 Republicans in the general election. They both made it without a fight. So that's how he got into office. Like, he won a primary by a little bit and then easily won the general election because no one ran for that position. And now all he's doing is promoting Christian nationalism and a theocracy. This is a funny story. I would show this to you, but it's a paywalled article that I can't show up here. A local reporter who has been following this guy since he got into office, he basically asked, like, hey, dude, what's up with all of these Christian nationalist posts? And I will show you this. Here you go. Weirdly, he only replied by sending me a screenshot of his phone screen showing my incoming call. I'm not sure what his intent was in sending that to me. Maybe he was rubbing the fact that he's not answering my call in my face. It's plausible. But I think he was maybe excited that I was calling and was eager to text the evidence to some confidant, gleeful that his hateful social media Jeremiah ad was getting some news media attention. Only he sent it to me by mistake. Sorry, missed your call. I'll probably decline to comment right now, Pritchard texted about an hour later. If you do write an article, though, I do have a bingo card ready to go. I don't even know what game he's trying to play here. Like, oh, you're a reporter talking about me? I bet you're going to call me a Trumpist or a MAGA kid or some slur against Christians or whatever. Like, that's what he's doing with this time. He's in legislative office. I don't care that he's 22. I don't care if I think he's a kid. He is in elected office. Start acting like it. That same reporter, by the way, his name is Rob Port. He actually pointed out Pritchard may not live in the district he represents, and that when he was running for office, he said he was an undergraduate student at the University of Minnesota's Law School and School of Public Policy on a part-time and virtual basis. Now, there's nothing wrong with going to the University of Minnesota if you're living in North Dakota. That happens a lot. That's fine. But the law school doesn't have a part-time program, and the virtual program is only on a case-by-case basis, like if you really need it, and I don't think Brandon needs it. So he said he's going to the law school, but the law school has said he ain't one of our kids. I don't know what he's talking about. So that's interesting. He also said, before he got elected, he was quadruple majoring in several subjects, and none of them involve law. So it's like this guy is trying to imitate George Santos and Marjorie Taylor Greene and whatever idiots are in office right now. Like, this guy is a liar who is in public office, and he's going to hurt everyone who's not a white male Christian. That's kind of his MO here. I should say the Freedom from Religion Foundation Action Fund, which is their lobbying arm, has called on him to apologize or resign. And his response to that on Facebook was this over here after they said you should apologize or resign. I will not listen to a godless, out of state interest group like FFRF. I'll say it again. Christ is King and Lord. Let's dedicate our government to him, his moral teachings, and his mercy. All God's followers say amen. It's Facebook, buddy. You can't hear. Anyway, I never understand that slur like the I will not listen to an out of state group. Like, buddy, if they were in North Dakota, would you listen to them then? Because there are plenty of North Dakotans who don't like what you're doing, and you don't seem to care about that either. So the question is, what happens now? I don't know. This isn't one of those things you could file a lawsuit over because being dumb on social media is not necessarily a crime. Until he tries to pass a law to like install Jesus as dictator, then maybe we'll see a lawsuit. But until he does that, he just gets to be a Christian nationalist as long as he wants, because America. Brandon, what other questions we got here? 22. So is his IQ. Well played, Christopher. I've been trying to find the thing we can't do named after Gomorrah. Yeah, like Sodom leads to sodomy, right? Sodom is the city. Sodomy is a bad thing, allegedly, right? According to the Bible. What is Gomorrah? I feel like Dan Savage must have an answer to that in one of his columns somewhere. I don't know what it would be. Maybe one of you in the comments can define what Gomorrah means. What state is he from? North Dakota is where Brandon Pritchard is from. And listen, if you live in North Dakota, there's a good chance you're one of the 7 voters in the state. Come on, vote this guy out. What are you doing? Tell me you're closeted without telling me you're closeted, right? I always wonder that about these Republican politicians who go so hard after LGBTQ people, because it's always projection with them. And if it's same with Christian preachers too. Like whenever Ted Haggard or you name the preacher is so anti-gay, I know it's a joke to say like they're probably in the closet themselves. They're probably hiding something. And sometimes that does turn out to be true. So it's like, yeah, set your clock. We'll see when Brandon's secrets come out. All right, I'm going to move on to the next story here. This is a disturbing story out of Baltimore, and I'll set you up for this. Back in April, the legislature in Maryland did something that was really amazing. They passed a bill to eliminate the statute of limitations for victims of child sexual abuse. At the time, like, you could only file a lawsuit against your assailant like for a few years after the fact. And a lot of people haven't really come to terms with their own abuse until much later in life. Sometimes it happens and you can't do anything because the law says it's too late now. Well, in Maryland, they passed a law saying doesn't matter anymore. We're getting rid of that. It did establish a cap on how much money a survivor could receive based on if they were suing a public institution, a private one, an individual. But suddenly, there was an opening for people who had suffered abuse as children to receive justice. And a lot of states have started doing this since all the Catholic Church stuff has happened. So wonderful. I'm glad that happened. That law went into effect on October 1st. Like last week is when the law went into effect. So a day or two before the law went into effect, here is what the Catholic Church, the Archdiocese of Baltimore, here's what they did. Archbishop Lori's message on Chapter 11. They filed for bankruptcy. And that meant that certain parts of the church could keep functioning. Churches could still function. Catholic schools could still function. But all the other stuff could go up for grabs. And it would limit the damages the archdiocese would ultimately have to pay out. That also, by declaring bankruptcy, it also puts an expiration date on when people can sue the church for damages, which is part of their plan, and it nullifies one of the big things about the new law. So that's disturbing. And basically, if I'm the Catholic Church here, if I'm Archbishop William Lori, here's the argument for why we're declaring bankruptcy. A few people have sued us. we are so screwed. We're going to have to pay them so much money. And, as the Catholic Church, we want to make sure every victim gets justice. But if the first people take all of our money, there will be nothing left for all the other victims. So by declaring bankruptcy, it actually puts a plan in place so that anyone who sues can get a little piece of the action there. Now, that's his version of the story. Like, they're really trying to help all victims. But the truth is, all these damages then get limited. Even if it's equitable and it goes to other people, the amount they get is a lot less. It also means, by declaring bankruptcy, no subpoenas, no public testimony before a jury. Survivors don't get to expose the Catholic Church. They don't get to state their case in front of other people for the first time. They don't get to tell their stories. And it sets a ticking clock on how soon they can file a lawsuit against the church. Like, as one of the critics said, what if you can't face it yet? What if you can't come to grips with your abuse yet? What if it happened, 20 years ago, and let's say you're 30 or 40 or something like that right now, but you're still trying to figure out, you still haven't come to terms with how that affected you in life. The law in Maryland was supposed to help you have that space so you could still file a lawsuit later in life. And this bankruptcy nullifies that. What if you're far away and you don't hear about the new law? And so you can't even get your lawsuit in time. That would be disturbing. So that's, I don't know. Maryland's law capped rewards for victims at $1.5 million. Even with that law in place, how little money does the Archdiocese of Baltimore have that they can't pay that much to every victim? Like, they gotta have a lot of money. And I can't imagine they're like, well, our bank account's very low, and so a couple lawsuits will bankrupt us. So we don't want to do it. And also, by the way, if you look this up online, Cardinal Timothy Dolan of New York City, when a similar thing happened in his case, he just moved money from the victim fund to like no one can touch this because we declared bankruptcy fund. And so, like, it would be very easy for the church to just move money into the churches and the schools where the victims can't get to it. I don't know what's stopping them from doing that. One thing you should also note about this story, all of this comes after the Attorney General in Maryland, Anthony Brown. His office released this 463-page report investigating sexual abuse in the Archdiocese of Baltimore. It was a 4-year project. It involved a grand jury investigation. And what they found was that over 600 children, but the number is likely far higher, they said, were abused by 156 predators inside the Catholic Church since the 1940s. And a lot of the predators are now dead, but some of them were not. And they were not previously suspected of any wrongdoing. This report named them and talked about them for the first time. So that means maybe you didn't know your priest was one of the people who was accused of this stuff. Maybe you didn't know that what that priest did to you was abuse. And now that you might know, and now that you might get justice from it, the Catholic Church wants to stop you from getting that sort of justice. It's just an awful situation. I looked this up. According to the Associated Press, the Baltimore Archdiocese has paid out more than $13 million to over 300 victims since the 1980s. And that includes a $6.8 million reward toward 105 voluntary settlements. Like, this is their life. This is what they do. And now they want to make sure no more money goes out to victims, as if they're using it for anything else. And listen, I've said this before. None of this is going to hurt the church. None of this is going to hurt the Archdiocese. The only thing that will really hurt any of these Catholic churches is if the people who call themselves Catholic stop. If the people who go to services decide they're not going anymore. Like, that's when the institution will finally suffer, when there's an exodus of worshipers. Like, if you're a Baltimore native who still attends church or supports the Catholic Church with your time or your money, you are complicit in their actions. It's not too late to get away from there. Like tradition or comfort, none of that is an excuse to prop up a criminal enterprise. And all these stories over and over just show how many predators there were, how much they were protected and shielded, and even how the church is willing to protect itself rather than give the victims what they need. What other questions we got here while I start wrapping this up? I've got a couple more stories, then I'll wrap this up here. I call salty people Gomorrans. I like it. Clever. Reference to Lot's wife. I like it. Yep. Very nice. Anything else there? I will keep going. I want to talk about this. This story kind of made me smile. I owe you a good story, don't I, at this point? This is the headline I saw that made me laugh. Valley Christian Academy football team forfeits to Coast Union again. So what's that all about? A Christian football team forfeits. Why is that a story? It's a story because, and I know, why do we care about high school football? Here's the reason. Valley Christian Academy is this religious school in Santa Maria, California. Last year, they forfeited a game against this exact same team. Why? Because the other team had girls on the roster. That's the reason they forfeited the game last year. And this year, those two girls are still on the team. So when those two teams were going to go head to head last week, the Christian school's like, yeah, no, we're going to quit. Bye. We'll take the loss. And that was that. And the other team didn't even do anything at that point. They've been through this before. So what that means is that the Christian team, which was 3-0, by the way, they are now 3-1. I don't know. And by the way, I was going to say they haven't played a game in several weeks here. And it's not a huge deal in the grand scheme of things, but I want to point out a few things about forfeiting a game because there are girls on the other team. Like, I didn't like that the other team just didn't say anything because that sort of normalizes what this Christian school is doing. I don't like that. Let's call them out on this bullshit. Last year, that other school actually went out of their way to defend the girls on their team. The head coach last year said, I am upset with the Christian school's decision, especially because the two girls on our team are being singled out for their gender. It's not fair. And I hope that because of the support of their families, the team, and community, that they can have confidence that we support them. The coach emphasized that the team would not consider either of them sitting out. They are part of our team and will suit up for every game. Like, hell yeah, that is how you do it. I wish every single football team that this Christian team plays against for the rest of this season, it would be the funniest thing ever. Every team needs to find a girl, put her on the roster if she's not already there, and then show up to the game. And you will get an automatic win. And then when the Christian school leaves the field, you can play a scrimmage so that everyone gets to practice or something like that. That's how I want to see other schools respond to this Christian school. Just ensure the victory before kickoff. But this actually does get more serious because in 2021, the same Christian school also refused to play a different team with a girl on it. And here's the thing. They actually played a game. They did a scrimmage or something against each other. It was a practice game. But after the game, the other team's players took off their helmets. The Christian school realized one of the opponents was a girl, and the coaches and the administrators allegedly, and I'm quoting here, glared at the player while shaking their head in disbelief. And the Christian school then sent a letter to that other school saying that girl wouldn't be allowed to compete on their campus, like when they had a real game. And that girl's family then sued the Christian school for violating state and federal rights, along with infliction of emotional distress. They actually said refusing to play a game because there are girls on the other team violated Title IX, which we talked about earlier, the federal law that prohibits gender-based discrimination. And the California group that oversees high school athletics says all member schools have to abide by Title IX. So there was a state lawsuit basically as well. That lawsuit was settled just this past August, and the Christian school had to pay $20,000 in legal fees to the girl and her attorney. So that's interesting. It actually only moved forward because a judge ruled that the Christian school had to follow Title IX requirements because it received PPP funding from the government during COVID. So if they're taking federal funds, they got to play by federal rules. Hilarious. But besides the legal problems here, like, one of the things that bothers me is, why is this school mad about playing football against girls? Like, I I would still disagree, but I kind of understand if it's wrestling, because you're literally like in headlocks, you're in close contact with another athlete. But this is football. It's not skin to skin contact. When I'm watching football on TV, I can barely tell which guys are playing because they're so covered up in stuff. So, like, what is going to happen? I don't even know what positions these girls play, but like, if one of them's a kicker, there's very little contact most of the time. So that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know what you're worried about, like, is going to happen here. Because if you're a guy and you're tackling a girl who has the ball, if that's a thing that, I don't know, excites you, you're not doing football right. Like, you'd make the tackle, you get up, and you go on to the next play. But also, the Christian school has said in statements, I'm going to show you this here. This is what the Christian school says in defense of their position. In our handbook, one of our clearly defined boundaries is there is to be no physical contact between boys and girls at this school, which is really how you set girls and boys up for life. No contact ever. He added that they train their boys to this is their writing, not mine, to rigorously admire and value women as precious and worthy of respect. Football is a violent game. We will not play a team, there we go, that has a female as part of its football team. Give me a break. Football is a violent game. Yes. And the girls on the other team volunteered to play it. And you know what's not respectful? Refusing to let them play you because you believe in Jesus cooties or something. Like, that's not respectful, to not allow them to show off their skills and talent, because they practice just as hard as the boys do. How come you're not allowing them to play the game? That's disrespectful to me. Even, I don't know, it's messed up. It is so on point for a conservative Christian school to act like a contact sport is equivalent to something sexual. And it's so condescending to pretend that these girls are not doing what Jesus wants. They're not being dainty. They're not, by playing football, as if they don't know what they're signing up to do. There was an editorial in the San Luis Obispo Tribune last year. It said Valley Christian Academy wanted these girls to trade her helmet and pads for a spoon and apron. Yeah, like, that's what they think girls ought to be doing. And I will say, like, you know what? I'm glad the Christian school that doesn't want to play girls on a football team, I'm glad they are just saying, they're not fighting about this. They're just saying, give us the loss, we'll move on. That is good. That's what they should be doing. They're not whining about being persecuted like Joe Kennedy did. They're just saying, look, our beliefs are this, so we're just going to take the loss rather than play you. So that's nice. But also, I don't think the Christian school should be allowed to compete against anyone if they can't abide by the rules, if they can't respect these other teams. I don't know why any other team is playing against them, period. Let the Christian students play practice games against each other. They don't deserve real competition if this is what their school is doing. And by the way, while I'm saying this, like a couple of weeks ago, a woman at Shenandoah University, a Division III school, she actually became the first female non-kicker to play in a college football game. So the rest of the world, the secular world, is moving forward on this issue. They're judging these women based on their talent, their skills in football, and this Valley Christian Academy is just stuck in the past. It is messed up. By the way, it's not the only time this has happened. There was a Catholic school in Pennsylvania that did this, a Christian wrestler in Colorado who did this. There was an Islamic soccer team in Ontario that didn't want to compete against women. And I just want to make sure no one treats these schools as like religious martyrs, as if the Christians are the victims here. They are not. They're cowards who don't understand how competition works. Very frustrating. What other questions do we have here? They were beaten by two girls. That should feel good. Damn right they were. Two girls who did the bare minimum and still beat all the boys on the Christian team. They're not going to go through another lawsuit necessarily, because just saying we're going to forfeit the game, you can argue that doesn't inflict damage per se, as opposed to like sending the school a letter saying no girls allowed on campus when you're coming to play our football team. So I don't know that there will be any lawsuit about this, but it would be nice. It would be funny. Always nice when the Christians get burned by, the law. Yes, hilarious. I am glad to see that. Some of the schools here in Clark County, Washington, have mixed gender wrestling teams. Yes. And a lot of schools in states that are highly competitive have mixed gender wrestling, mixed gender football, and some other sports. Because if there is no girl option to play certain sports, and you have someone who's good enough to compete with the boys, like, let them. It's high school, you guys. It's not even professional where they got to worry about X, Y, or Z. This is just kids want to play. Let them play. It's the same argument we could be making with trans students too. And that's not what this story is about. But it's the same thing. It's high school sports. All they want to do is compete. Like, stop making a big deal about kids who just want to play. Most kids in high school don't want to move. These kids want to do something athletic and competitive. That's amazing. Good for them. I had several female sparring partners in jiu-jitsu, and I'm not going to try to pronounce that one. I have not heard of it. They could easily kick my ass, and I'm a big, muscular Scottish guy. Yeah, I mean, good on them for taking you up on that and sparring with you as a fellow competitor. That's how it should be. And again, if they have the skills, and we're talking, I don't know what the skill differentiation is. Like, does it go by weight? Does it go by something else? But if someone is matched at your level, or you are practicing with each other and you respect the other's athleticism, I don't see what the big deal is. Normal people can do that sort of thing without it becoming sexual. Christians, conservative Christians, cannot. That's like Mike Pence can't even be in a room with another woman who's not his wife. And normal people are like, yeah, I can wrestle a fellow wrestler who's female. It's fine. It's a sport. All right. Two quick stories to wrap this up. These are both amusing ones. The one mom at 1 million moms, here you go. She's going after Paw Patrol. Her name is Monica Cole. She is the one person who does 1 million moms. The name is a lie because they are Christian and they don't care about lying, apparently. But basically, the argument here is Paw Patrol, if you don't know, very popular cartoon. Kids love it. It is also jokingly considered propaganda. But it's a show about a boy who manages a crew of skilled dogs who all help protect their community. Well, that show has a spin-off. It's called Rubble and Crew. I will say I have not seen Rubble and Crew. I've seen so much Paw Patrol with my kids. I've not seen the spin-off. But apparently on the spin-off show, a queer YouTuber named Linz Amer announced recently that they had written an episode, or at least helped develop a character for the show who is non-binary. And you could see that character right there in the center of that picture, surrounded by the dogs. And basically, the people behind the Paw Patrol spinoff asked this YouTuber, hey, we want to develop a character. The character doesn't have a gender. It's just someone who likes skateboarding, and we want to make sure we're doing it right. So they kind of ran a lot of stuff by this YouTuber. And that was it. This is what Linz Amer said. They brought me on to consult on the first non-binary character. Meet River. And Linz goes on to say, I wanted to write a non-binary character that was aspirational and incredibly cool. Someone for the pups and kids at home to look up to. And if that sounds like not sexual and totally innocuous, it is. If you watch a clip of this episode, which I did, the clip of the episode is like, oh, cool, this is a skateboarder who's helping the dogs do a thing. And that was it. And you come away thinking, oh, that human is very nice. And that was the end of it. And here's the thing about the character being non-binary, which the Christian group is very mad about. I would never have even thought about that seeing the clip. It's just a character. The gender is not referenced. It doesn't even come up, which I guess is part of the thing. Like, it doesn't matter if it's a boy or a girl or something else. It's River. It's our friend, right? That was the point of what they were trying to do. It's irrelevant to the plot what the gender is. But according to Monica Cole, this is the funniest thing about this. After she's complaining about this whole thing, here is what Monica Cole says. Yeah, here we go. Though River's gender is not mentioned openly in the episode, Amher's social media information makes it difficult for Nickelodeon to deny their intentions. Plus, the character gives subtle hints, including the transgender pride flag's pink, white, and light blue color scheme displayed on socks and shoes. Like, I promise you, your 5-year-old has not made the connection. Obviously, River is a blatant attempt by Nickelodeon to normalize children identifying as non-binary. The Nickelodeon that parents knew as children is long gone. Nickelodeon has now decided to be politically correct instead of providing family-friendly programming. But Nickelodeon should stick to entertaining, not pushing an agenda. Like, I promise you, that was family-friendly programming. The dogs and the human didn't do anything weird. It was fine. I promise you, if your kids watch the episode, they would just sit there, enjoy the little doggies doing whatever the doggies do, and that's it. The biggest reaction they would have is, wow, River seems awesome. And that is what Monica Cole and the Christians at 1 Million Moms and the American Family Association, that's what they're afraid of. If you positively depict someone who doesn't fit into a traditional gender role, they automatically think that is indoctrination, because treating LGBTQ people as humans goes against everything those Christians stand for. Like, if you get offended by a children's TV show for showing friendship and cooperation, like, maybe you're the problem, because normal people are not going to find an agenda in that episode unless they're actively looking for a reason to be angry. And here's the thing, in Monica Cole's ideal world, LGBTQ people would not exist. No one would ever acknowledge them. Her idea of neutrality is bigotry. Like, think about this. How many times have you seen a show with the husband and wife and you didn't think it was like promoting straightness? But when these Christians see like a gay couple on TV, they automatically jump to, this is an agenda. This is not normal. Kids should not be seeing this, because they're lunatics who are obsessed with like what gay people do in the bedroom. By the way, as I mentioned on a previous live stream, the group 1 Million Moms is associated with, the American Family Association, they are currently facing a lawsuit from a former employee who says they ignored my complaints about same-sex sexual misconduct by a leader at the organization. So, like, maybe, look inside your own house and see what's going on there. Maybe worry about what's happening in the AFA, the American Family Association, instead of who a bunch of fictional cartoon dogs are befriending. That should not be your biggest problem here. Any other questions there? And then I'll jump to the last one. Thank you for that donation. Some MAGAs don't understand that every square is a rectangle. What was that in reference to? That that even gay couples are also couples? Something like that. I don't think they understand that. What we need to know is what genitalia the cartoon character has. Seriously, the thing about all these anti-gay, anti-trans Christians, conservative Christians out there, they think nonstop about what is in kids' pants. That's all they spend their time thinking about. And meanwhile, those kids are like, I would like to use the bathroom so that I can go back to class. I would like to play a sport because I enjoy teamwork. But these conservative Christian adult humans are like, sorry, I need to see what's inside your children's clothes. She never heard of Ren and Stimpy. Oh my God, her brain would explode, Olivia, at the idea of what happened with Ren and Stimpy, or any of the other cartoons that are not directly marketed toward children and they are meant for cross age audience. I would pay money to watch Monica Cole watch an episode of South Park. Just keep the camera on her face so I could see the reactions. That would be amusing. Thank you for that super chat, by the way. I appreciate that. Let me go to my last story, and then I'm surprised she didn't call the creators of the show groomers. I'm sure she probably did in isolated emails, but she didn't do it in her protest press release, so I wouldn't put it behind her. One last happy story for you all, and I'm going to show you this picture right away. It was so cool. NASA recently named a new head of technology, policy, and strategy. And this happened like a week or two ago. But basically, what you're looking at here is Charity Whedon is her name. She's the new associate administrator for NASA's Office of Technology, Policy, and Strategy. Basically, what she does is her office is going to help guide the agency's strategic planning and investments, and that shapes the future of space exploration, which is awesome. I mean, this is someone, according to a resume, she spent 2 decades with the Royal Canadian Air Force. She was a senior director of policy at the Satellite Industry Association. She earned her master's degree in space science. But the reason I want to share this with you all is she's getting sworn in there. And if I zoom in, that's as far as I can go. You could see the book she is swearing in on there. That would be Carl Sagan's Contact, which is such a cool thing. Like, if your job is all about the joy and the awe of exploring the universe, then Contact is a book that really talks about all of that stuff. So I love that. And actually, what's really cool is she's not even the first person. Sorry about that. She's not even the first person to do something like that, because just a couple of months ago, where is this? This was on April. This is back in April. Dr. Mackenzie Listrup was named director of NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland. Again, her resume is stellar. I'm not going to go through it because it's very long. But if I show you that right here, when she got sworn in, if you zoom in on what she's getting sworn in on, can you see that right there? That right there is a copy of Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot, which is that whole book that kind of explores like our place in the universe. So she's not swearing in on the Bible either, which is awesome. And it totally makes sense, because if you're taking an oath, you want it to be meaningful to you. And for a lot of people, putting your hand on the Bible is not meaningful. And I don't know if any of those people I just mentioned are religious or not religious, but both of them are saying this book means a lot to me. And I love that trend, and I've been seeing it more. There was a representative, Robert Garcia, who got sworn into the last Congress. He took his oath on a bunch of books that meant something to him, including a copy of Superman issue #1, which he got on loan from the Library of Congress. Other politicians have taken oaths I've seen on a Dr. Seuss book, on law books, the Quran, Hebrew Bibles. Like, there is no law that says you have to take an oath on the Bible. That's just tradition. And if you're going to use a book of fantasy, like, there are a bunch of options, not just that one. So I like the fact that these people are using a book that has personal meaning. It represents the office that they're going to hold. That's the sort of tradition I wish more people could get behind. So I really appreciate that. That is so cool. So good for them. I will take a couple more questions, and then I think I'll sign out for the night. If anyone has anything else here, I would love to answer your questions. I should be back at this time next week, and I hope you're enjoying these live streams. Hopefully by this time next week, maybe I'll be at 100,000 subscribers. We will see. You can do your part. I should use my little banners here. Yeah, like, subscribe, and donate. You can support this channel by going to patreon.com/Hemant. And if you're not subscribed already, you're already on YouTube. Go do it. Just click the little, I don't know what it is anymore, the button. Do the button. Cool. If there are any other questions, let me know. Anything else here? In that case, we are good. Thank you so much to Den for helping out with the moderation. Thank you all for watching. I have no idea what the number count is, but thank you, three of you, for watching. I really appreciate it. And have a wonderful weekend. I'll see you all next week.